Miigwech. Yeah. Anamatig. Bina. Welcome, welcome. Well, tonight we're going to start the first of two parts on Nishwe Ishkodan Niganagag, the 7 fire prophecy. So we had to break this up because there's so much to it. And I want to thank my partner here for doing a lot, especially with the slideshow. So we're going to do 2 things with this. Because of the way it is, the people had moved from the Atlantic seaboard and migrated west through the Great Lakes area. And so we're going to look at those 2, that we're going to look at that according to the prophecies, where they are at the time, in the time of that Pacific prophecy. So people get to know how they're moving along the Great Lakes and the things that happen to them. And so in the introduction, and from what I've learned over the years about the 7 prophecies, at one time our people, most of the Algonquin people, were living right on the Atlantic seaboard in the northeast part, I guess, of you could say the Americas there, but it wouldn't be up in the Atlantic. It wouldn't be up in the Canadian part of the eastern seaboard. And the nation was at peace, and everybody was healthy and content and plenty of food. And at that time, what they called the Medewan, the Grand Medicine Lodge, was the center of their life. Let me explain a little bit, because this is going to be repeated throughout the prophecy. Medewan is the ancient worship and belief system of the Anishinaabe, of our peoples. That lodge was given similar to how the 7 teachings were of the grandfathers. It was spiritually given. Try to put this in perspective. The people at that time, with their knowledge, people had learned how to do evil things and bad things to other good people. And so at that time, there was a lot of bad people using their craft, their knowledge and skills to hurt people at that time and control people. And so the Creator sent people down to teach the people again about how to use the land, again, trying to go back to unity, good health, having the focus on family, and using learning from nature. And so this Grand Medicine Lodge was given to the people. And in that lodge, there's, some say there's 4 degrees, depending where our people live and how it's developed. that lodge. And some say there's 8 degrees. So the last 8 degrees are basically, they're another deeper version of the first prior 4 degrees. And so there's a study of the different kinds of water. There's pure water that we drink and the animals drink, and then there's salt water, and there's water that forms in sloughs and ponds, and then there's the lake water and all kinds of water. There's rainwater, and there's a lot of teachings about the water. And then there's the grass, all kinds of grass that grows, undergrowth that grows, that has plant life. A lot of that plant and grass is very good. There's things that you can eat from it or cultivate. There's medicine, and some of it's used for different things. And then there's the shrubbery and the trees and the barks of the shrubbery. All of it's medicine, a lot of it's food stuff. And then there's the vegetation as it grows so far from the inland, and as it gets closer to the water, there's rows of different things that grow where they get more water, and the soil changes its composition and stuff. And so this is what they learned in the Medewan. But it was also a spiritual lodge, and how many of the plants were given by the spirits to add better understanding and provide a better life for the Anishinaabe, for the people. The use of medicine. Also, they gave them songs to sing to the plants. And so a lot of the teachings of our people and traditions about gathering plants, harvesting plants, there's ways about them. So one of the things is that before you take any plant, whether to use for food or for medicine, you have to offer something in return. Okay, like tobacco, sema. Okay, but you also should sing to it. And some say that they will sing to it 4 times when they approach it. And at the end of the last song, then they'll harvest it. And that's to speak to its spirit. Okay. And then when the medicine is prepared and it's ready for human consumption, that spirit will reactivate. And then another song is sung. And then, of course, it's given. And this is some of the lessons of the Meday. And there's other things, much, much more other teachings about the Meday. Now, with it, again, before I get into this 7 teachings, they're going to talk about another element that is of the Meday, and that's what they call the mega shell. The mega shell is one of the symbols, intangible objects of the Meday. In order to become a member of the Meday, the most powerful men and women of the Meday actually shoot that shell, that sacred shell, into your body. Yeah. They shoot it inside your body, and then they leave it there for a time, and before the first day, they'll retrieve it out, and it belongs to you. So it acts as wingus, like sweetgrass. It puts your body in a state of mind to learn, to understand things. So the shell itself is very powerful. And so within these prophecies, they're always looking for two objects. The turtle-shaped island and the mega shell. Okay, so they're all tied together. And I believe that actually the appearing of these mega shells were actual. It's just not something they would dream about. They would actually find them, and that would help them stay there. That it meant they were on the right course. Okay. So let's go back to the first prophecy. Yeah. Okay. Akawe Ishkode. Akawe Ishkode, the first fire. Okay, the story is, and there's two conflicting stories. The story is that the people of the dawn, the Wabaniki, the people of the dawn of the first light, they were the first ones to see the first fire, and the prophecy was given to them. Okay. And then the other story is that it appeared to all the people, all 7 of them. And then the Wabaniki or the Micmac or some of the other Algonquin tribes, the first light people, they seen it first. Okay. That's the two different stories. So at one time when the people were on the coast, there appeared off the Atlantic seaboard, and I don't know how far, but all of a sudden emerged out of the waters of the Atlantic 7 pillars of light. It wasn't one great light, there was 7 of them. And they were tall and they were full of fire, and they appeared. And of course, it drew the attention of the people living on shore, and they just sat there day and night watching these things. Well, they stayed out there for some time, and some people, they knew something was going to happen, but they couldn't say what. And they sent word to all the other people, their neighbors, and part of that great confederacy, if you will, all these other tribes. And so there was a great crowd of people gathered on the shore, and they were waiting to see what would happen. In time, these things slowly started moving on the water. And as they came onto the shore, and they, in unison, when they stepped onto the land, the fire of each individual ones fell away. And in its place, there stood a person. Okay. And so the old people said they were spirits. They were actual tangible spirits. Okay. And they knew they had something to say. So the first one spoke up. And he said, the people must rise. They must leave here. All at once. They must leave this place all at once. And they must take whatever they have, whatever they can grab, their children, their wives, or whatever they can take. And they must go to the west, travel to the west. And you must follow the sacred megashell of the Medeoin. So when they said that, to me, he was saying that you have to prepare for this journey, but you have to be of the right state of mind. You have to have faith. So they were asking him to take a journey, and they weren't sure where they were going to go, but they must find an inland waterway. And must look for a place that has this turtle-shaped island. Well, the first place they found that island, it's quite a distance in Maine, the state of Maine, to travel from the East Coast. I don't know how many hundreds of miles it was. But here you go. Oh, yeah. Okay. So they stopped, and it says they found this turtle-shaped island, and they named it Maingweaneg, the place of the yellow-tailed flicker. Okay, the flicker bird. And over time, when the French eventually got here, they called it Montreal. And I'm not sure what that means in French. They said you will find an island at the beginning and at the end of your journey. There will be 7 stoppings along the way, and you will know that you've reached your destination where you find that food that grows upon the water. The food that grows upon the water. And this really baffled them because the food that grows on the water, well, they must have been fishermen and used the Atlantic. They must have had big boats. They knew food grew in the water, the fish. Here you go. What kind of food grows on the water? Huh? Yeah, manoman. Wild rice, manoman. If you do not move now, the nation circle will be broken and destroyed. And so, as a group, when they heard this thing, they said, well, how can this be? Look how great our nation is. Our people, from one end to the other, our people are so dense. Our people are so strong. How can our circle be broken? How can our fires be put out? But some of them believed. Some of them believed. We'll go to the next one. So they looked for that inland waterway, and they finally found it. And from there, I can't even see this. You will know this time because a nation will be established by a large body of water. And so we know they traveled down here. Can you zoom that together more? Can we see it more or bring it in? Yeah, why don't you go back to the first one? Not that one. Yeah, that one. Okay. So we know yeah, okay. That over there, they went by, from there, when they journeyed from that place, their first island, they went and they encountered the falls, the Great Falls, Niagara Falls. And they camped there on both sides of the lake. Now, you can imagine they were If you ever been out to the Great Lakes, especially the eastern part, and I have, you can't even look across these lakes. They're like seas, you know, you can't see the other end. And so you can imagine hundreds of canoes going down this lake. And then they came to a place here, another shaped island. And up here by Buffalo, there, they split. They split. And you have three nations up there. If you can go back. I guess I should have reviewed this a little bit. Oh, yeah. So you have your Algonquin proper, your Nipissing, and your Mississaugas here. They all crossed over there. And for a good part of them, for a while, they stayed up in that region. Now, this was the longest time for them to go through this, just these 2-3 stops. And the reason why, when they came down, they encountered an enemy that was known for its warfare. That's all they lived for. They taught their young boys nothing but war. And they believed in slavery, enslaving, killing the men, some of the men, bringing them back, taking their wives and children and raising them as their own. And so they would do the hunting. They would do the trapping, and the warriors themselves. And this was the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois. And so here they were right in the middle of their country on both sides. And they had to battle through that for quite a few hundreds of years. But that didn't even stop. That didn't even stop. And so they had to split up. While some of them went north, some of them continued, but stayed more to the north west of them. Okay. All right, let's go back. Let's see. You will know that this time is here because the nation will be established by a large body of water. The third stopping place, then unto Manitoulin Island. Well, Manitoulin Island is at the top, almost directly above Lake Michigan. But it took them a long time to get there because when they got to, let's go bring the map another one. Let's see, go back. Oh, okay, at 3, the stopping place here. I've been out to that place, and there's that lake right in the middle here. It's a pretty big lake by Detroit. There's an island in there. It's a pretty big island. Yeah. Well, the people went inland, and they actually went almost to that place, Chicago. They call Chicago. But they didn't see the mega shells. They didn't find them. And there was no stepping stone ponds or lakes or islands in that way. And so they went that way. But they had to come back because they realized this wasn't the route. So they came back. And then, but still the Iroquois at that time, they were battling the Iroquois. And they went up north. And right by the intersection, right there at the first point of this lake here, I wish I had brought my stick to point at, right over here, where it goes up. They stopped. And they found they found 3 mega shells, large mega shells, sitting on a huge rock. And they knew at that time. It was also at this time that they decided, because of the constant warfare that they had were enduring from the Iroquois nations, that they would form a new strategy, a way of thinking. And so it was there they met the Nipissing again, the Mississauga, and the Algonquin, they called themselves. And there the Ojibwe nation was formed, the Three Fires. They called the Three Fires. Okay. They realized that their way of life was being threatened so much that they had to move. Keep moving. In this time, the direction of the sacred megas will be lost. The Medewan strength will be diminished, but a boy will be born to direct the people back to the traditional knowledge of the Medewan. He will provide guidance back to the stepping stones to the future of the Anishinaabe. Okay? So they're saying that when you have constant warfare, and that's the only what's going on continually, you're not coming together to for peaceful measures. You might not even have time to plant your corn, plant a garden, or go throw your nets out to go fishing. It's always constant warfare, and maybe something beyond the next hill, they're going to run into a large group of enemy. And because of that, the Medewan and the teachings in the lodge was seldom ever put up. And the people didn't like coming together in large bunches because that's how they like to be attacked, when they were all together. So at that formation, when they formed the Three Fires, you have your Potawatomi, or as they say, Potawatomi, the fire keepers. So the sacred fire of the Anishinaabe was handed to them as keepers of the sacred fire, which means they kept the life of the people. And then there was the Odawa. The Odawa were the in-between people. Okay? They would deal with the needs the people had. And then you had also your Chippewa, or your Anishinaabe people, those who would record, those who would keep a record. Okay? So 3 different purposes, but one nation. Now let's go back to the map that shows the concentration of there. Okay, so the orange, the lighter orange, they concentrated. So the land of the Odawa and the Potawatomi are basically on the north side of what is it, Lake Ontario? And then around Michigan. And like I said, I had friends up there in my younger days. We used to go visit them, and the elders would tell me, that they were that those 3 fires. And right here at this top of Lake Michigan, there's a place called Green Sky Hill. Green Sky Hill, you can stand on it and you can look way, way out. You must be it's the highest hill on the tip of Lake Michigan, the northern part. It's very high, and from there, and it's a big flat. And within that big flat, there's mounds, smaller mounds. And if you count them, there's numerous mounds, like 40 some mounds. And at the center, there's a little mound that's higher than the rest. And right behind these mounds is the remnants of these old trees, these big pine trees. You could see the stumps, but then the other ones had grown out from them. And it's an ancient council site where they used to come together, all these different tribes, and their leaders would speak from there. Yeah, Green Sky Hill. And so from there, they had 40 some different tribes. Decisions were made, and that's where it was determined that the people should become the three fires, the strategy to move on. Okay, let's go up to let's see, I don't even know where we are here. We're on what prophecy are we on? Okay, so we completed that one. Let's go to the third. The three fires. So, in the third fire, the Anishinaabe will find their chosen ground, a land to the west where they must move their families, the land where the food grows on the water. They find a turtle-shaped island just west of Manitou. Bawiteng, the rapids. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here it is. So they move along, and as you see, they move up here to Manitoulin Island. And I know an old man from there. I don't know if he's still alive, but met him up in Canada. He's from there. He's one of their chief medicine people, and a very nice man. And there they congregated again, and they put up the Medeon Lodge. And then from there, they started moving west, and here on that third stepping stone of island, the second one, excuse me, they found a turtle-shaped island. You can see it up there. It's round, but it's somewhat oval too. And within the center of that, they found the mega shelf too, and they knew they were going in the right direction. And from there, they went to where, at the east entrance of Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, they called the place Bawatang, the rapids. They stayed for a long time there. It was a great place to live because the fish would jump up the rapids, and they would spear them, and they would have these nets where they would just catch them. And so they stayed there for a long time. And the people, they found another people there that inhabited the south shores of Lake Superior and along that whole area. And this was the Onondaga. The Onondaga were the people of the Fox. Like the Sac and Fox, they were people of the Fox, and also they were the Dakota, the first Dakota they had ever met. They speak a similar language, okay? They were a woodland people long time ago, the Dakota. They wore the same kind of moccasins. They built their villages like rafters, instead of our people had these like large wigwams. And there, they called them people of the rapids. The Dakota called our people the people of the rapids. And that's how, at this point, the people split again. There was a main division that went up on the north side of Lake Superior, and then there was another section, a large group that went on the south side of Lake Superior. Okay. All right. And we'll get into this on the fourth one, but let's see. How far did we go? We went to the fourth one, didn't we? Yeah. Ningogai, Gajiji, Ishkoden. The next one. Okay, there it is. They were at the place where they had found, they were actually on the south shores of Lake Superior. When they first encountered the first white men to come. First time they seen them. And that was in 1620. And there were several big boats. They weren't actual big sail clipper ships or anything, because they didn't have a way of getting over the rapids with those big boats. Okay, so they had big skips or big rowing keel boats, something like that. And so something unique happened, because several things happened. They had never seen white before, and the way they were dressed and the way they talked. And so the leader of that expedition, his name was Sir that name, Sieur Duluth. Sieur Duluth, and the city of Duluth is named after him. He was given a charter to travel by one of the kings, King Louis the Sixth or Seventh, and so he came up there exploring that area at that time. Huh? Well, no, they were copper plates. They were copper, no, not lead, copper. Now it's documented in his diary that the first that next, because they camped with them, and the next day or the day after, there was 20 braves come walking. Between them, there was long pole stretch, and they were burdened under this heavy rock, red rock, and some of it was greenish. And what it was a big piece of about a 15-foot piece of ingot of copper. Yep. And they presented this to him. Well, he couldn't take it, it was so heavy, but he wrote about it. He made a record of it. And today, they mine a lot of copper up in that country. That's copper country up there. Okay? They made a note of that. So it was a valuable mineral back in England at that time. And of course, he brought other things they never had seen before. You know, metal knives and shiny things. It was at that time too, the story came about because the French leadership, the French upper class, they often wore around their neck and their collars this real fancy scarf. And it was satin or silk, and it was shiny. And they were really attracted to that for some reason. They'd never seen anything like it, their clothing, especially the scarf. And it said that some man had a dream not long after when they first left, that the spirit seen that too. And so they wanted that. Asukan, Yeah, Asukan, that particular spirit that looks at things people wears, and they wanted that. And that's where this whole concept of cloth as offerings come, especially the shiny ribbons, if they could get that. So I had asked about that, and that's what they told me. So now, in this fourth prophecy, it was delivered by two prophets. Doesn't say the fourth prophet, it probably was one of the fourth prophets, but one of the others spoke up too, saying, the future of the people will be determined by the face he wears, the white man. If he comes wearing the face of Nicanus, brotherhood, then wonderful things are going to come in the future. The knowledge of two great peoples will come together and wonderful things will come for the people. And the second prophet said, beware of the light-skinned race. The face of Nicanus and Nebo-Win can look very much alike. Nebo-Win is the word for death. So the face of brotherhood and the face of death can look very much alike. If the rivers run with poison and the fish become unfit to eat. So that speaks that they may come not out of friendship, but maybe they're just looking for our resources, what they have, our land. Maybe they want our land. It wasn't long after this that other Frenchmen came, and they weren't so much interested in the land at that time, but they had made actually what they believed a claim to the land and its resources. At that time in Europe, in the 1600s, there was wealth, and dress was very important, especially amongst the rich, bourgeoisie, they call them. It was very important. And one of the things they found was that beaver. Now, by 1620, already England was now in the colonization and had came to America by 1620. Yeah, earlier, what is it, 1492, Columbus came, and then there was the John Smith, Jamestown area, Virginia, was, what was it, 1609? And so they were in a race. Now, it's interesting. I was reading a book today about the confederacy of all the eastern, the southeastern tribes. Now, within a short decade or even a generation after they first came, our people treated them very nice, gave them land to stay on, showed them how to farm and everything, all of this. But in no more, in just that short time period, they started wanting more land, and then they saw that there was differences in how they saw the value of the land and how things were. And there was a tax. And some of the tribes, they got them to attack other tribes. In fact, part of the way when the people were here in this area, the Iroquois made a big push, because by that time, the Iroquois had extinguished their lands of furs, and they were looking for more fur. And they wanted the lands of the Anishinaabe that they had settled in here. So they were trying to get those lands. And that actually was part of the 100-Year War. But this other war, because they seen the Dakota and the Onondaga, seen that our people were there to settle down and they wouldn't have that. And that started a long war too. Yeah, King Philip's War with the French. And so you had these tribes joining either the English or the French or the Americans. But what happened to the tribes on the West Coast and the land where the Anishinaabe were? Many of those tribes almost became extinct. The Connecticut, only the names are left. The Connecticut, the Massachusetts, the Delaware, all those different, thank you. You're helping me. I appreciate that. A lot of those Eastern tribes, they're slowly starting to get recognition, but it wasn't very long that they all became extinct. And we know now why the spirits told them to leave there. Because if they would have stayed, they also would have been destroyed. So this is where we are on the fourth fire. So they were looking, the French were looking first to, they wanted furs. So the first French people came into our lands, and many of these men they brought over and they stayed for long periods of time, and they took Native women as their wives. And this is where you have the mixing of the tribes and the French and the Scottish people and other Europeans, but largely the French. And up in Hudson Bay, that was happening too, up in that area. So this is why you get a lot of the mixed bloods up there with the French, back to those early days. That's how it all started. Where are we at on time? Oh, really? Okay. Is there any questions from anybody right now? No questions?
So actually, I was thinking that the ball.
The what?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nebelwind. Yeah.
So they came with the brotherhood would be shaking of hands, combining cultures and thriving, and then the death would be they have some kind of weapon, and then like we would fight, but we would not perish all the way.
I think the shaking of hands is a relatively new expression.
Well, it was just like the brotherhood. They were
Yeah.
cultures and thrive, but if they came with a weapon, we would have a long fight, but we'd still shoot hard.
I think that first encounter, I don't know if I don't think they offered the people guns.
Well, no, if they came with weapons.
They might have come with weapons.
I was wondering if
They probably did come with weapons because as explorers, they had to protect themselves and stuff.
Trying to word death and nibble out the way.
But they weren't sure. They weren't sure of their what they wanted. At that time, they learned that the French wanted to trade. And so the next group of French that actually came, they wanted the furs. They found out they wanted the furs, but they did take small chunks of copper back. He didn't take that big one because it was just too impractical for him to take. But they took samples of that and they wrote down about the customs. They stayed with them for quite a while. And they had different things that they saw, like metal pots and not certain, just things that they had brought with them for their own thing. Yeah, like plates and silver forks and knives, and then there was the knives they had, you know, and those were things that they were interested in. Yeah.
Possible to travel. I'll just talk about. Sorry. Is it possible to travel in a car to all these 7
Yeah.
places?
Yeah, there's roads
I
now.
see a lot of water, but I don't know if there's.
Well, you can't travel on the water unless you take a boat, but yes, there's all through here. You can see this is actually a highway map.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
the
is?
LOC. So you
I
can
can't see.
actually do that. And actually when you when we look at the next week, when we're looking basically at Lake Superior up by Portage, that is the place, they had a big fur company up there, a trading post. And from there, there are annual trips that they actually voyage, meaning they carry their canoes and they go up into the Lake of the Woods area. And then they come to the Red Lake up by Winnipeg, and they travel as far as out into Saskatchewan by the lakes, the old Portage trade routes.
Are all 7 doable in 10 to 7 days or 2 weeks?
Hmm?
Plan. I mean, is it doable?
Yes,
to-
yes, it's very beautiful. I've been out there. It's very, very beautiful. And
No, but is it doable in 2 weeks? Like,
No.
could you? No, it
No.
isn't. Okay.
no, it's no, in fact, from Sault Ste. Marie up there, this passage right here, see this road here between Upper Peninsula and then the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then the mainland of Michigan. That bridge there is 3 miles long. And you can look at these big ships that are passing and they're big, huge freight ships. And they look like little toy boats down there. That's how high up you are. And they go into Duluth, and they actually, for the mining companies, they get ore and they come back out through the St. Lawrence Seaway to the different place where they process it, the copper ore. Yeah. And all kinds of other. And it's the winds up there are horrific. So it's not a platform bridge. It's 1-inch grates. The grates are 1 inch thick. And so there's squares in them, and the air can blow through them. They're not solid, because if it was solid, it'd be windswept, the bridge would sway. But they say it's close to 1 mile high, not more. Yeah, it's kind of scary going over it. So, well, you get out there and it's beautiful country. A lot of it's mountainous and rocks and beautiful forests, but you realize how brave our ancestors were a long time ago, because they had to navigate these inland seas. These are really like seas, because how long and how deep they are. But the coasts are beautiful. They're rocky, full of timber, beautiful, beautiful sights. Yeah, big pine forest, big, huge pine forest. So a lot of that timber is bigger and taller than anything in Montana. So, but they found out they wanted to come to barter, and mainly it was the furs, the beaver furs they wanted, and the Great Lakes and all the rivers and streams surround inland lakes, and they were just filled with beaver. And the people felt there was plenty of beaver, So they trapped, and they showed the French where all of them were. And eventually the French came in, they built forts, they built trading posts, and of course they brought all their nice European materialistic things. And when they, about 18 or 1620, after the third flight, they had, all these Frenchmen were carrying guns too, but they didn't fire them off. They thought they were just some kind of sticks. But when they did finally fire them off, they thought they were thunder sticks. Yeah, Nimki Mitig. And they realized the power of them. And their wars with the Dakota at that time and the Onondaga, they realized really quickly the effect it would have on them because they were getting pushed around a lot. Okay, because they were always newcomers in this land. And so around 1640, 1630, not long after the first white man came, they started trading for guns. They wanted the guns. It became the number one thing they wanted, the men. Of course, the women wanted the sewing needle. They wanted the thread. They wanted the pots. They wanted the metal knives. It just made everything. And then, of course, the cloth. And the people right away, they just started transforming, you know, actually the way they looked and dressed that way. And their camps changed. Everything was not as hard anymore. And so they were, but at the basis was the beavers. So in those days, over in Europe, women wore coats and frocks that were lined with beaver fur, and the men wore these top hats and their hats, and that was beaver that was shaved close. Everything, all the wealth of the beaver, it commanded high prices. Okay.
Beaver almost like
Yeah. Yeah, the Iroquois had pretty much wiped out everything. Later on, yeah, after we got ornaments that were comparable to theirs, yeah, armaments, but it took a while. So they say that the migration from start to beginning lasted anywhere from 1,200 years, maybe to 1,500 years, maybe even later. So they stopped along the way and they built their villages. Yeah. So if we go back to the map again, where that shows how the people, so this now is where a lot of our people are from, okay? And fortunately for our people, when we still live on those ancient traditional lands from the beginning, from the migration, okay? So, and then of course, as the people came up north and west, they integrated with the Cree and the Assiniboine, and so you have these people as they went north and west. Yeah, and west. So, and the Chippewa up in Canada, they call them Sauteur. It means the same thing, the people of the rapids. Yeah. Bungi. Yeah, so. Yeah, so do we have anybody online that has any questions? Yeah, do you have any questions out there? The next three prophecies are going to get really interesting. Now that we have contact with colonizers, it gets from the time that people start to realize that the French are not necessarily after the lands, but they need an ownership or some kind of a stake. And so up till the time of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, and because that was a long war in Europe, France sold the Louisiana Purchase for $3 million. And that's how, but the only place the French ever lived was in any mass was down in Louisiana. Okay. So basically, they claimed a whole interior of a country that they really never lived in, but because of the fur trade. And when they got as far as to the Mississippi, and the Mississippi starts up by Lake Bemidji in western Minnesota, and it just goes down. You what? Oh, the headwaters. Okay, I was going to say, wow. Okay. Yeah. It starts out as just a little creek coming out of Lake Bemidji. Yeah. So, but yeah, once they got a foothold, then the furs didn't go up to Hudson Bay. They had a direct route down to Louisiana. And that's how that all was. And so all of a sudden our people realized that this country was no longer then. It had been claimed by a foreign colonial country way to the east. Yeah. And so that's how, that was what was behind it. And the French fighting the British all the time was basically a continued claim to the wealth of this country, starting with the beaver. And then there was the otter and all the other kind of fur animals that were very, you have to remember, Europe, after these continued wars, the country was wrecked. Their forests, their rivers were polluted. Everything was just in disarray in Europe. And they were looking for more riches. Basically, not only to make their elite more prosperous, but it was to fund their wars and their domination over lands over there. So they had brought that.
One question online from
Okay.
Julian Banks. Was it mostly peaceful exchanges or was it more conflict?
It was peaceful at the beginning because our people fell into the trap of materialism. They had never seen. You have to realize everybody was on an equal footing here originally. Nobody was more important than anybody else. It was basically feeding your family, sheltering your family. It was family oriented. Exchanges of anything, furs or anything, it was just trade, that kind of a commerce. And when the French realized that these people, they like to trade, well, in return, we'll give them some of what we have, which they like, and in turn, we'll get some of their furs. They're out there all the time in the woods anyway. They know the rivers, the creeks, where all the beaver are. Yeah. Yeah. And if they took fur-bearing animals, they would eat the beaver or the muskrat. They didn't waste them. They just didn't throw them away and take the hide. That's why when the first buffalo hunters came and they were just killing the buffalo for their hides, they were just appalled at it. They would just take the hides and the tongues and nothing else. They leave the carcass. So they had a whole different mindset than our people. And so they didn't talk anything about land or settling, but they weren't against the men and the women cohabitating and having children. They didn't see a problem with that. And many times when the traders came in with stocks of stuff to trade for the furs, and that's how it all got started, is the chiefs would marry off a daughter or one of their daughters. And by doing that, that patriarch, that chief, trader was brought into his family. He had to say of where the goods, the wealth went. And when they realized that the guns were so important, that whole tribes or groups of people would go and supply the furs, but they would get everything that the trader was, and they would keep the other tribes out. They would control that trade. And so the Anishinaabe got a huge advantage after 1630 because they were getting all their warriors were being supplied with weapons, with rifles, with guns. And the French was teaching them how to use them. And their life was getting easy because they didn't have to hunt as hard, trap as hard. And they realized that they could shoot with accuracy with a little ball of lead and kill something. And when they went to war with the Dakota would just run. This invisible thing was hitting them and making a hole, and they would fall. And it was powerful. It wasn't, and there was a system of wars, and it was in 1680, finally, they had claimed all this land. The Anishinaabe got all of this land here around Lake Superior from the Onondaga and the other nations. It became ours through warfare. All the reservations up in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, all of them, from Fond du Lac, Red Lake, Leech Lake, Net Lake, Thunder Bay area, those were all Dakota reservations, villages in the beginning. Once our people got the guns in 20 years, we had pushed them all south in the gunpowder. Yeah, the Northern Cheyenne were pushed south. The Cheyenne were all woodland people. They were part of the Great Confederacy at Green Sky Hill. And that's how we gained it, through that rifle. So, and those wars continued. So there was peace made in 1680 and with the Dakota and the Onondaga, and they moved to southern Minnesota and southern Wisconsin, the whole chunk, which are the Fox. And then Shakopee and the other ones, yeah, the Winnebago became part of that group. And then in 1680, it was agreed, and then at that peace settlement, it was agreed that they would allow the Dakota and the Onondaga to have guns. They had controlled it that long, that trade, and the other things of the trader. Now, if you ever heard of Verende is known in North Dakota because he was a trader and wealthy, and he came up through the Mississippi River and then into the Dakotas, and he tried to establish a trading post in the eastern part of North Dakota. And apparently, he put his cabin on lands that were Dakota land. And there were 6 of them. And I guess the Dakota came up there and wondering what he was doing, and there had been no agreement that he could be there. Anyway, Verende and his brother left on a hunting trip, a trapping trip. And when they came back, the cabin was burnt down. And those 4 men, they had actually been skinned alive. And their skins were laid out like a deer hide staked on the ground. And the men had, their bodies were actually staked down on top of anthills. Verende and his brother escaped, and they realized they had put their cabin on the wrong side of a river, and they moved together. But there was great battles and hatred between each other, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Sioux. Great hatred. And I have stories about that, and talks about the butchering and all the, how that hatred had just continued to fester for 100 years and just never died out. What they used to do to each other was just terrible, terrible. Yeah, a boy Nug Sioux, the crawler. Yeah. So that's what the French, well, that's, yeah, they took from the, yeah, that's what our people used to call a boy Nug, a bois Nug. The French called them Sioux. Okay, did I answer your question? I hope so. So it was the commerce. It was the commerce. Our people actually fell prey to that. You know, I mean, unfortunately, your daily life happens in the day, you know, and that's how our people over a great length of time, and it was only through the Medewan and spiritual intervention would the people actually get back on track, a spiritual path. And eventually they found that food that grows on the water right off on Fond du Lac on a lake called Spirit Island. And as he found it growing, it's like reeds, tall reeds coming out of the water. And it's got a long stalk, just kind of like wheat, but longer. And you could actually row through there in a boat, and it just falls off. It just plentiful. Just the whole lake is covered with it. But that whole area is full of the wild rice lakes in Minnesota are just all over. Huh? And 13 different kinds of beans, not wild rice. Yeah. Okay. Time is it? Are we? Oh, let's have something to eat and visit. Mm-hmm. Give it the mic. Yes.
I might never give it up.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that, you know, historians now are starting to talk about this thing called the indigenous critique, which is that the French not only took buffalo hides and beaver pelts, but ideas about democracy back to France, because the native people that they met with were not impressed by their hierarchical ways, and the natives that they took back to France, same thing. So they try to take those ideas over there, and that's maybe where the ideas of democracy came from in France.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, the English got it first. Benjamin Franklin. So when the Iroquois and the colonists were getting together in the early times, there was trade and there was friendship. The extending of the wampum belt from the Cayugas and the Mohawk, a friendship belt. And so a lot of times what they did, they exchanged young men. Harvard, one of the most prestigious universities in this land, actually was built by and commissioned by King William to be because the English wanted to trade and get into the pelt business. And so now the Dutch was the ones that first gave them the firearms, but the English wanted to get into the trade business. So they exchanged 8 white men for 8 Iroquois men. And so they were going to raise these white men up in Iroquois country as warriors and hunters. And what they did is they took these 8 ones, and when Harvard was built for the native people to get an education on. Yes, you can get it. You can go as a native person, if your GPA is okay, you can still get into Harvard for nothing. It's free. Yeah. But anyway, only one of the Iroquois actually graduated. The others died from dysentery. They couldn't take their food. The white man's food, couldn't take it. It didn't sit well with them. They got sick. And then there was only 2 of the white men that would, because of the rigorous living on the land at that time, only 2 of them made it. The other ones, I think 2 of them committed suicide, and there was another 4 that made their way back. But they also Benjamin Franklin had spent time up with the Iroquois and seen how their government, and seen the structure. And prior to the actual country being formed as a government and the Constitution, this is what Ben Franklin's contribution was, and it's written in the Constitution, the Iroquois Nation. Yeah, and the 3 styles of leadership. It's interesting because in our language, Ogima, which means chief, one thinks of Ogama. Where's the Ogama, the chief? Actually, that doesn't even mean chief, doesn't even come close. What it means is like, I belong to her. She is my mother. It refers to the woman. Because the people of the Atlantic were somewhat like the Iroquois. It was a patrilineal society. And so the women were the clan mothers. They chose the only man's role was that they chose the men to speak for them, what they wanted. But they chose the leaders. The women chose the leaders. She was the mother. She was the dominant one. And the men, they spoke. And so when the white people came, because of the way their society was set up, the women were subordinate, to man. It was a man's world. They wanted to speak with a man. So the speaker became the chief. But behind it, it was really the woman. Yeah. Yeah. That's how it went. So the home and all around it, that's the woman's domain, but the man out in the woods, that's his domain. To run around and scream. Sure didn't feed me. You didn't have supper. Yeah. So, so if you compare the different tribal groups like the Anishinaabe and the Dakota or Lakota, you have a whole different system. The men are the dominant ones. They sit in even on council. Women are still kind of subordinate in all the homes. The men are the boss. The women are, and it's proven because there's high rates of abuse to Native women on the reservations because I worked on them. I've seen that. But amongst the Anishinaabe, the men and women are equal. And they're very outspoken. So, yeah, they always carry a club too. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose we could conclude. Now, next week's